So I'm Jamie Whyte. I head up Trafford's Innovation and Intelligence Lab. I am from Trafford, as you can imagine. So Trafford is, I'm going to start by, and we'll get that out of the way, on the other side of the Pennines here. We are in Manchester, just kind of 2 miles southwest of Manchester, and then we're covering an area about 47 square miles. This is actually, because I'm just going to try and contextualise what we're doing here, we are a diverse borough. This is the Indices of Deprivation 2010. New one comes out tomorrow, which I'm very, very excited about. But this kind of gives you a bit of an idea that Trafford is, we've got this kind of clear north-south divide in it. So when we talk about Trafford, we can't talk about Trafford as this. We have to break things down a little bit further. So that's something that's very kind of important to the way that we do stuff. So I've got a lab. I call it a lab. Anybody that I speak to outside of Trafford, they also call it a lab, but people within Trafford tend to call it a hub because they're not comfortable with the concept of a lab. I don't know why, because when they see me, I don't have all conical flasks and retort stands and all that kind of stuff. The idea, though, is that we're a bit experimental. So we sort of focus on three main areas: data, technology, and sharing what we're doing. So that's, it sort of feels like it's a bit of a bolt on that, but actually that's probably one of the most important things that we do, because by in kind of sharing and telling people what we're doing, it tends to lead to more opportunities. But I'm not going to talk about that too much today. We came out of, I know I'm not an artistic person, so I haven't got the kind of fantastic slides that Lucy does. But I can do kind of things like this. So this is what we do, is we try and make things not kind of council. We're not the sort of traditional council role. We used to be within the performance function, doing dashboards and all that kind of stuff. But we had a cut, as everybody does. And there was a decision taken to salami slice the performance team, where a few people from each layer were sort of gotten rid of. And at that time, I sort of took the opportunity to say, well, take me out of there and put me into a separate little, almost like a skunk works type arrangement. We'll call it a lab, we'll get a couple of people, and we'll just go and do some stuff, but with the partnership. So we are still owned by Trafford Council, so we're still the council, as it were, but we're not hosted by the council, so I don't sit in a town hall. The main reason for that is because in the town hall, I'm not allowed to put stuff on the walls. So things like post-it notes and writing on windows, which is all kind of really important when you're doing this kind of thing, we weren't allowed to do. So we were looking around for somewhere to live, and we moved into a library for a little bit, but that didn't work because we ended up in the storeroom, which was unhelpful. So we're hosted by Trafford Housing Trust. So Trafford Housing Trust is the biggest RSL, biggest social landlord in Trafford. Something like 9,000 properties. Trafford has a population of 250,000 people. So we moved into the Housing Trust, and they allow us to do what we want in there. They also deploy a couple of members of staff in because they recognise the value of what we're doing. So by being a bit sort of creative with data and trying to pull Trafford Council's data, what they said is, we could get involved in this. So Trafford Housing Trust agreed to give us a GIS person, which is someone that makes maps, and also all the data that they have. So suddenly, we've got Trafford Council's data, but we've also got a social landlord's data. And that's starting to, by kind of putting these data sets together, we're starting to see some benefits of that. Trafford Partnership is our local strategic partnership, so that's essentially the chief executive of all the different strategic partners across Trafford. And we use that, so we sit under that arrangement, and it allows us, it gives me access to the chief of police and the head of the CCG, and that's where we can start to have conversations about sharing data, not personal data because it's too hard, but kind of aggregated data so that we can start to get a bit of insight. So in my team, I have me, who's a sort of data, whatever you call me, open data. I know where to get data from and what to do with it. I also have like a hardcore data person who's a bit more stays behind his desk and doesn't really talk to people. I also have a coder. So the code that's really, really important for me in what we're trying to do. So because rather than just releasing CSV files, we're much more about adding a bit of value to that to get people interested, to help with people making decisions. So by getting a coder, it's HTML, JavaScript, that allows us to make some nice things out of the data. We also have a public health analyst, so that's, Public health are really evidence-based, and they're very kind of focused on this notion that what they do should be supported by evidence. And not many other people in the council are really like that. So that's what we want to do, is start to take this model of people, making decisions, sort of data-driven decision-making, I suppose, and applying it to other areas of both the council and the sort of the wider area. Then we've got some other kind of people who've agreed to be part of this. Trafford College is we don't have a university in Trafford. So with, the next best thing is a STEM centre. So it's science, tech, engineering and maths, 16 to 19 years old, plus the kind of mature students. So that's interesting. It's an interesting avenue there for us to look at the kind of that higher education type data, but also starting to think about how we might weave data and the stuff that we're doing into their courses. Great Manchester Fire and Rescue, obviously, so we get incident level fire data. Trafford CCG is a relationship that is developing. It's been difficult. It's been the hardest thing to get, certainly CCG and the police, who aren't even mentioned on there, because they just don't have the time to commit any kind of analytical support to what we're trying to do. But they do give us data. So, there's once we start to, we'll kind of touch on that a bit later on. The Cabinet Office funded us, so they part-funded our launch. £50,000 we got through release of data. This was specifically around the release of open data. So a lot of, kind of what Lucy was speaking about, they saw what we were doing and, they thought it was good. So they kind of said, well, we'll fund it, we'll support it, and we'll help you get to a point where you can start to, become more sustainable. So that's been really useful. And Trafford Teaching Schools Alliance is a new kind of arrangement that we've entered into, which is around how we direct research in schools using data. So and this has really just started. So we're kind of really excited about that. So data. So the different kinds of data that we sort of kind of run the whole range of things: open, closed, personal, big, and linked. And we won't not get involved in personal because it's too hard, because we are still council, so we have a right to do this. We can do it. We just can't necessarily release the kind of the fine granular stuff to the public. And then linked is kind of an area that we're moving into. So in terms of what we do, so this is now kind of moving into the practical. I'm not very good at the theory of open data and all that sort of stuff. It's much more about practical things that we've done. This was the first thing that we did as a lab. So we were approached by our mayor, whose charity was to flood Trafford with defibrillators. And we sort of said, we need to be a bit more careful about this than just him going out and raising money and then buying these defibs and then putting them wherever he wants. So which is unusual for kind of a council and mayor to work together on this kind of thing. Normally they will just go and have a civic gala, dinner, and whatever, raise a load of money. But we said, we could think about what data we've got about this and start to think about how we might, take a bit more of an intelligent approach to this. So that's what we did. We went out and we crowdsourced the locations of existing defibrillators. Now, I thought there would be 4 or 5. But there were actually about 30. So there were 30 units around Trafford that we just didn't know about. So we dropped these on a map. And what we then started to do was layer up data about the area. So we started to pick out, things like cardiovascular disease rates, physical activity, lifestyle, demographics, all this kind of stuff, so that we could build up a picture of where in Trafford we might want to prioritise, if we were going to buy 10 units, where we most want to get them. We also sat down with a few local people and said, in terms of local knowledge, because we don't have the footfall type stuff that somewhere like Leeds has. So we needed to start to think about, anecdotal stuff about, which shopping centres are there where, there's lots of people, maybe, that kind of stuff. So we started to think about that. And as we built the layers up, we started to pick out areas that we wanted to focus our attentions on. One thing that we were missing though was this was all sort of demographic type stuff. So it's not about where people are. So we were able to go to North West Ambulance Service and say, look, can you give us? Is there anything we're doing this? Can you give us anything that might support us? So they gave us incident level data, so postcode data of where they went to, where somebody was having a heart attack, where a defibrillator could be being used. And that was really useful in terms of being able to then have this picture of this is where we want stuff to be. So what we did then was we mapped these, we came up with a list of 10 sites and then a list of another 60 ambers that that we want, and each one was sort of had an impact on the other. So as you kind of selected, if you got one somewhere, then it might knock out 2 or 3 around in the local area. And it's been the most successful mayoral campaign that we've ever had. In terms of cash, I can't remember what the cash amount is, but we're now up to, I think, 100 DFibs around Trafford, which is massive, you know, and so loads of schools have got them, and, you know, we kind of covered all the areas that we wanted to do. What we also did actually was by understanding where we wanted them and knowing where our businesses are, we could say to, you know, a group, we could kind of draw a circle around a site that we'd want. And the mayor wrote to those businesses and said, you know, look, we're trying to put a DFib in your area. If you can contribute, then, you know, that would be really helpful. So it's, you know, it's been a real success, and it's actually something that got written about in the Guardian, which is, you know, it's really good from a kind of PR perspective, I guess. So this is another one that we started at the same time. Now this is the long game, because we've only just now found out whether it was effective. So this is about cervical cancer. And specifically around screening of cervical cancer. So we were approached by public health, who came at us and said, you know, cervical cancer screening rates in Trafford are 69%, I think they were. So we were like, oh, right, okay, you know. And they wanted to look at a piece of work around how we might get that up. So the first thing we did was we went to all the GPs, and we said, you know that the cervical cancer screening rates are, you know, 69%. Can you tell us what your individual screening rates are? And they did. So we got this data off them, and we dropped it on a map. And this is something, you know, that it sort of felt like, you know, it was the obvious thing to do, but, you know, apparently not. But so we mapped this, and you can see that there's, you know, this kind of north-south divide sort of gets borne out here, where we've got up at the north, our cervical cancer screening rates were much lower than they were in the south. So what that allowed our public health lot to do is start to think about, rather than having a leaflet which goes to 100,000 households, maybe they want to start targeting specific areas. So we did a bit of toing and froing then, and we laid some data, some demographics type stuff, picked out what languages are spoken in the area, and, you know, recommended them, you know, write a leaflet, put it in these languages. What they did was they sort of started to think about, you know, the area up there, and we looked at those GP practices, and we were able to go back to the GPs and say, we're not going to make this available, but can you tell us the postcodes of the people who do not go for screens? So they gave us that after a bit of a kind of tussle, really. And we dropped that on a map as well. So then we had quite a small, focused area that said, you know, if you're going to do some work, this is where you want to do it. And they sent out a kind of commissioning type person, and she walked the streets in that area, speaking to women, just saying, you know, have you been screened? If you haven't, why not? And they started to build up this picture as to why women in that particular area weren't being screened. And there was a lot of stuff around things like, my husband says that because we're married, I'm not at risk of cervical cancer, so I don't need to get screened. And there's a lot of this kind of perception that they were able to pick out just by, you know, walking the relevant streets in the areas that... Anyway, so we kind of did this, but the reason it's a long game is because they've done all this work, and we've just had the results now, and it turns out that screening rates have gone up by 10 percentage points in Trafford, which is fantastic from our point of view, from, you know, kind of use of data. From the CCG's point of view, it's great because they've gone over an 80% threshold, which means they get a load of money, and it's good for our public health because they get a bit of kudos, and it's good for, there's at least 2 women have been screened and had early stage something identified that is now being treated. So there's this kind of real sort of everybody benefits from this kind of thing. So infiltrating the community. So this is probably, I don't know whether it's the same community that you talk about. This is the community, as in, you know, kind of all people. So I talk about data a lot to a lot of people. And one of the things that we've done in Trafford is we split Trafford into 4. So we split into 4 localities. Each locality has a board, and that board consists of elected members and strategic partners and community champions and voluntary organisations that operate in that area. And each one's about 20 people, and they all sit down and they all make decisions about what should we focus on for the area. So in June, July time earlier this year, they said to me, would I come and present the data about their area to those boards, plus, you know, a group of, you know, a wider group of people who are invited, so, you know, it's kind of broader stakeholders, and just talk to them about the data that what data says about their area, so that they can start to make more informed decisions. So I went to these, and this is my slide deck, and, you know, you might think this is pretty boring, but actually it isn't. It kind of brings it to life a little bit. But this is it, you know. So it's standing up in front of, you know, it was in total about 240 people in Trafford who are, you know, they're all sort of making decisions either, you know, together or separately. So I've got, you know, kind of corporate directors. I've got, you know, some, you know, two-person I mean, they're very good, but two-person, community group who's doing stuff in an area. So we're able to go and present all this data to them and say, these are the needs. This is what we know about your area. So instead of focusing on, updating a duck pond or whatever it is, you might want to think about childhood obesity. But it allows them to make these decisions about what they want to focus on. So they're able to do that, and they come out of this and they say, well, these are our priorities. As a locality, our priorities are these. So when we start to think about giving out funding to community groups, this is what we're going to ask for, invite those groups to apply for money based on things that will address the specific needs of our locality. So it's been hugely successful and overwhelmingly positive. So people came out of it knowing what they've kind of been going, what do we do? But now they're able to at least say, well, this is what we've got to focus on. And people generally feel quite comfortable, except one person who didn't like it because I was critical of his area. I know. But I learned something as well from this. This is, so we kind of do a bit of visualization. So this is electricity usage across Trafford. And we have, in the north of the borough, it was, the data was, really quite kind of negative, it's sort of low life expectancy, high benefits, all that sort of stuff. So, and I got to this point, and it was the first one that I did. And I said, but it's not all bad news. You don't use as much electricity as, as the kind of people in the south or anywhere else. And I got hammered for it. They were like, well, just because we can't afford to, And I was like, this is something that I just hadn't even considered at all. We'd kind of gone on for however long, looking at, energy usage, electricity, gas consumption as being a good thing because it showed that the people in these areas are environmentally aware. But actually, I kind of, I properly got my pants pulled down, which is fair enough, and I was able to, kind of change my perceptions based on that. But, it's kind of win-win for both of us. Also off the back of it, and this looks horrible, but actually, this is sort of lots of screens all, stuck together and then blurred for some reason. But this is, what we also found out from speaking to these people was that they really liked this concept of area profiles. So we did area profiles in somebody did them in 2004, and then they were never updated. Now, we did a digital version, it wasn't very good, in about 2011, as a performance team. But they said, we found them really useful. So this is what we started, it gave us a bit of a focus for something to work on. So we rumbled up some area profiles, which, this kind of doesn't do it justice. But the idea is, that they're sort of interactive, you can click on a word and do all that. So, but again, it gives us a bit of direction about where we want to be going. What also came out of it was that people are really into data. And, people don't think they are, but actually they are. And, there's a lot of value can come from it. So we said, well, what we'll do is we'll start to hold open data, so open in brackets because, they turned into sort of data surgeries rather than just open data. But we said, we'll have this kind of idea of a drop-in. So every month we'll have, we'll sit in a room and people can come to us, no appointment necessary. They can just turn up and speak to us about data, and we will do what we can to help them. We'll point them in the right direction for where they can get national data sets. We'll give them stuff, we'll help them out. And they've been really successful. So the first one that we did, we aligned it with our equality grant. So our Diverse Communities Partnership had £20,000 to give out just to any community groups who could put in, a bid for a kind of relatively small project that would help a disadvantaged group, particularly with employment, but kind of broader than that. They just got this money from the partnership, to give out to people. So what we did was we launched this. And I spoke, so I went and said, this is the situation and the protected characteristics in the borough. This is where the different types of needs are. And then we sat down at a round table in a corner, and we had maybe 14 groups come over and say, I really need data about this to support a bid, or if I'm looking to do some lip reading training, flipping heck, lip reading training, And I'm specifically focusing on older people. Where am I best, looking at, putting my efforts? And, but being able to just be open with people and just say, well, you can get the data from here, or here's this, it's really good. So I think they had something like 24 applications for money, 12 of which contain data and evidence that we've given them. Now that suddenly means that that people are putting bids in and they're thinking about it. So they're thinking, so quantifying the number of children not in education, employment, or training because it's a data set that we release. So we know that there's a need then in a particular area. We know that they're not focusing on Bowden, where there's like 1 or 2 people, they're focusing on Partington, where there are, significantly more. So it's, it's good from our point of view, and it's good from their point of view. The other thing that came out, and this is kind of really interesting now, is 2x2 are a community group, 2 women who they're arts-based, and they do art. So they animal-based art. I don't think they describe it as that what I do. And what they did was they got some money from this thing called Make Sale Smile, which was about stimulating growth in the town centre, getting people into the town centre and doing stuff. So what they did was they put these footprints around Sale Town Centre, and kids go and they get like a trail thing, and then they can follow the trail, and there's stop-offs along the way. So there's a cafe, and you get a bit of a discount at the cafe, and there's a shoe shop, and you get a discount at the shoe shop, if you've got the trail thing. And it's really nice, it's a nice kind of engaging thing. I think they've got some plastic penguins as well, or something around, which are, it's better than it sounds. So they came to us as well. So they came to us with one of these drop-ins and said, we've got to do this, we've got to do a thing that, that tries to evidence the value, the impact of what we've been doing. So we were like, all right, okay, this sounds like it's up our street. And the good thing about this is that I wasn't involved at all in this. It was two of the lads on the team that did it. So they sat down, and it just so happens that they captured feedback from every single person that had done the trail. So what we were able to do was sit down with them and really start to think about what as the organisation ultimately that gives the money, what would I want the person that I've given the money to give back to me to tell me how effective they are, if that makes sense. So we started to work up a bit of a profile with them, and we kind of drew a bit of a map that showed, this is where all the people come, so there's, an interactive version of this. And it shows, somebody came from Sunderland or somewhere like that, but I don't think they came specifically for this. But, still there's quite a broad reach, and we were able to sort of pull out their data that they gave to us and give it back to them in a way that they could then sit down and really think about, well, this is the actual impact of what we've done. They then went back to the partnership and presented this back. So they were able to say, ultimately, this is how many people were involved, this is where they came from, this is how they heard about it. And there was something like, 300, so they got a grant of 500 quid. And there was something like 300 people who said they came into the town centre and wouldn't have done, and they bought something. Now, if they bought something for £1.50 each, then they've made that 500 quid back. But if they bought a pair of shoes or a meal, whatever, then suddenly, there's more coming into the economy than. And the whole thing was just a really good exercise in identifying a need and attracting a bid, and then helping them then evidence it. So that's been good. So solutions looking for problems. I don't think this is a bad thing. I'm a big fan of you see something and you think, oh, that's a really good idea, but I don't have anything yet to apply it to. And we had this with. This, City Talking. So this is Leeds. Leeds did this. I think Hebe Works or Mark Barrett and co. And they made this thing, which is how well do you know your superhero? And it's a chord diagram. So this is a specific visualization technique, which is a way of connecting two different things to show the relationship between them. So what this is, superheroes down one side and superpowers down the other side. I thought, that's really nice, this. So we had a bit of a play with it, and we were in the library at the time. One of the librarians was a big comic book nerd, and he came in and he saw his backside over it because there was something that was, I don't know, Superman was intelligent, but apparently he isn't intelligent. He's just I don't know. But anyway, so but the point was that he was able to, and he's a good lad, but he was able to pick out a lot of information, very, very quickly by navigating through the thing. So we started to think about how can we take this principle and do something with it that's useful, from a sort of public sector point of view. Now, it just so happens that at those locality partnership meetings, one of the things that came out was children going to grammar schools. So in Trafford, we have a 2-tier education system. We have high schools, we have grammar schools. Grammar schools are all, you have to sit an entrance exam. And, there's this kind of feeling that maybe, there's a bit of disparity in the proportion of children that go to these grammar schools across the borough. So we just did a quick thing, mapped it, and drew this. And it turns out, Buckler St Martin's, which is one of the wards, one of the more deprived wards, 8% of children go to grammar school. In Bowden, 81% go to grammar school. So that started to think, we're kind of thinking, oh God. So we had to present this back to, elected members and all that. But we thought that there's more to be done here. So we thought about applying this. So we turned it into this chord diagram where, and this is a spatial subject, but actually it doesn't need to be represented on a map. A map would just confuse things. This is a much, for people who know, where the schools are because, you're an elected member of the local authority, so you know where the schools are. you know where the wards are. So starting to get into the relationship between all this kind of stuff is very, I mean, this looks like a migraine to start with, but when you start to, you know, the pink is the grammar schools and the green is high schools. But you can start to filter. So that Buckler St. Martin's, which was 7%, you know, we can see that the greens are going to high school. There are very few pinks there at all. I mean, kind of, I don't know if there are any. But then there's some go out of borough. So, you know, we don't know why that is. It's probably something to do with them being kind of isolated, both, you know, sort of slightly socially, but also physically as well. And then Bowden, which was the other one, these go to these two grammar schools, and if they don't, then they do one, either out of the borough or to private schools. And this is, you know, nobody knew this. So suddenly, you know, we're beginning to get a bit of insight into the way that people move around the borough. You know, and it's sort of interesting because there's a lot of I don't know, anecdotal type stuff that goes on around it. A lot of people chunnering and making noises. But actually, you know, what we're able to do now is properly evidence it and say, you know, look at all these kids coming in from outside of Trafford to our grammar schools. You know, and as soon as you can show people that, you know, and I had to present this to our head teachers, which was frightening us. But, you know, it was good. They were sort of like, this is really depressing, but very, very useful, you know. So it was, you know, it's an interesting thing, you know, for us to just to start to think about different ways of kind of showing data. And the good thing about this is because we share and we're trying to be, you know, trying to say to people, you know, look, this is how we've done it, this is how we made it. You know, I'm going to talk about Coda, but we, what happened with this is we had Greater Manchester Academic Health Science Network, a fellow from there, who do a lot of research into health needs across Greater Manchester. He picked this up and said, oh, I could do something with this. So he went and made something which was exactly the same principle, but showed referrals from GPs to hospitals or something like that, which is good, you know, because he's been able to pick that up. Then North West Ambulance Service have looked at it from a, you know, which ambulance divisions or whatever it is are going to which hospitals. So again, there's this principle of, you know, I got it from Leeds and, you know, then did something with it, and now, you know, other organisations are beginning to take on. And it is beyond, you know, there is no doubt that this is aiding people's understanding of, you know, what is actually quite a complicated issue. Different strokes for different folks. Okay, so this is about different visualization techniques. So this is one theme that I picked on here, National Child Measurement Programme, childhood obesity. Every 4 to 5 year old, a 4 or 5 year old gets their height and weights recorded, and 10, 11 year old. Somebody does some stuff with it, I guess. It happens across the country, and you know, you kind of come out with this sort of percentage. And then traditionally what used to happen in Trafford was there was a report, and the report was, you know, I don't know, 8 pages long, and it went into, you know, all the kind of detail. But we decided to pull it back a little away from that. There is somebody that still writes a report, but it's not me. So what we did was, just kind of going into the different ways that we sort of look at data for different people. So this is an infographic that we rumbled up, which just had the kind of core headline data on it. So, you know, and what the people that found this really useful are the school nurses. So the school nurses go out to the schools and they record the height and weight. You know, and you know, some of them will happily accept a table of data, but you know, a lot of them won't. By giving them this, they're able to print this out, you know, and they've got it stuck on their, you know, the kind of the divider that separates the desk, and it just, you know, gives them that, you know, that what they're doing is being turned into something that we're trying to do stuff with, and you know, it's nice. We mapped it, so you know, we kind of look at the spatial elements of where are they, and that helps us inform the, you know, the things like the locality partnerships and public health strategies. And any other groups, you know, so if we're looking to commission, you know, some kind of scheme, you know, I don't know, which aims to tackle child obesity, then they can, you know, use that to target it. This is something kind of a bit more hardcore, which is a 3D scatter plot. So the idea is this is actually, you can grab this and spin it in air. Each dot is a child, and it means, you know, you can sort of get a bit of a sense of how the, you know, what the distribution of the sort of heavier children are. You know, I'm not quite sure what's going on with that one up there. But you know, but it allows you to kind of turn it in space. The depth element to it, so you've kind of got weight and height going up in there. The depth is postcode matched to a kind of deprivation type model, which, so when you spin it, you can start to see the bandings of children, where the heavier ones, you know, what kind of social strata are they in. What we can then do with that is tie that into things like communication methods. So how do we best communicate with them? You know, what kind of lifestyles have they got? You know, it's all kind of interesting stuff that allows public health to really get into data. And then this is, you know, the kind of standard area profile that we've seen twice before already. So the stuff that at 2 by 2 and the area profiles. Because it's a template that we've built, we can just drop data in and do what we want with it relatively quickly. The future, this is horrific. So I thought it'd be great to like put my face through an aging thing. Look at that. It just depressed me. So, but anyway. So yeah. So the future for us, we're currently working on our joint strategic needs assessment. So again, all the principles that I've spoken about, they're being applied to our JSNA. So how we kind of forgot that. Oh. Yeah, so maps and being very kind of focused on the spatial side of things, because the inequality within Trafford is massive and people need to never lose sight of this. So by framing it around a kind of a map type approach, it means that people always have this understanding. So that's what's this? This is dementia, the number of dementia patients laid on top of kind of age demographics. But we've also got this, and when I sat around a steering group table yesterday, and people were kind of a little bit interested in it. But then this is really, really kind of early prototype of how we're going to allow some people, not everybody, because not everyone's suited to this sort of thing, but navigate through the JSNA and explore things. So you can pop the nodes to see where it leads and see what the connections are. So it's a really kind of, it's an interesting and pretty kind of far out way of dealing with all the kind of massive health needs that we've got. And by being able to visualize it like this, some people get it. So it's someone sat around a table and we're going through all this, the strategy for how we designed the needs assessment, and then this came up, and because it wobbles, it's kind of you can drag things and it's all like it all reacts with itself. And it's nice, so it's a bit of fun, but it's also there's a serious message. But he'd kind of gone through all this, and then this was what got him interested. So it's this sort of kind of going back to the principle of different things get different people going, and as many of those things that we can try to get people interested, then it's going to be good for everybody. This is, so we're looking at tools for how we might give data to people. So there's a lot of people, a lot of performance people, research people, commissioners, all of whom should be making decisions based on data, but aren't necessarily. And so how can we use data and give it back to them in ways, and I'm not saying that this is everywhere, but this is sort of, maybe it's something in Trafford where there's a lot of stuff is around preparing data, and finding it, and if we can give it back to them in ways that they can then use. So this is a dynamic scatter plot that we've started to rumble up, which calculates the correlation between two data sets. So we've got about 8,000 data sets in here, and you can just kind of pick two random data sets. And correlation does not necessarily equal causation, but it's an interesting thing. So this is elections, voter turnout in 2015, and the number of people with no qualifications. So it's a starting point to allow people to just think about how two data sets might be interrelated. What it also does, though, it also calculates the correlation between a particular indicator and every single other one that we've got in the database, which is a nice, it's kind of, maybe a little prompt for people. But it's, it's early days, and we just started to do this with the school performance tables, which is interesting. And linked data. So I said right back at the beginning, we're starting to think about linked data. This is the sort of future for us. So we've got, yesterday we had population forecast loaded into a triple store. So this allows us to, it adds more structure to data so that you can, explore it a bit better, so you can, do stuff with it. I think, it's very, very early days for us on this, but, sort of a proof of concept. What's that? H2. I don't know, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing over here? Okay, let's see. Well, this is Canal Bridges in Greater Manchester. So this is pulled live out of a triple store. So this, if we add one, then it gets added. It's nice. None in Trafford, but there are canals, so I'm a bit worried about that. But it's not my bag. And then that's the kind of the other data sets in there can generate this sort of thing very easily. So this is Broadheath Ward's population pyramid. Because I've done this, it's a snap for me to do this for any ward in Greater Manchester now, which is useful for being able to give it to to other authorities to get them interested in this sort of stuff. Oh, things that I wish for. Time. Because we're a small small team, but we've got a lot of people who are interested in doing in using us to try and everybody's valuable. So it's it be either more time or more people, but never have more people. A designer. I'm not a designer. None of our team are actual designers. The kind of the fancy things. Anything there, it could do with a design eye on it. And I would love to have a graphic designer or somebody who can just look at it and go, rather than me spending however long trying to colour match or whatever, someone to do that. Better internal engagement. We struggle internally actually with getting people engaged. I feel like I'm more known outside of Trafford you know, in like kind of the streets of London, than I am, I mean, within Trafford itself, which is, you know, this sort of bizarre thing that, but, you know, I'm aware of it and I'm trying to deal with it. I'm more disciplined. I am the most undisciplined person. And you know, you need discipline, particularly when, you know, if I'm sort of hacking up something, visualization, you know, and I'll make it live because I like, you know, get it out early and let people look at it. And then, you know, my coder kind of comes in. He's very fastidious and he's very, very strict with me, telling me to, you know, that I need to annotate things and, you know, strip out anything that I don't need. So these are that's you know, my wishes myself, and the shameless plug for Open Data Camp, which 10th, 11th of October. Lucy had mentioned it already. Manchester. You know, it's I think there's about 20 tickets left. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but you know, it'll be good. So lots of data, lots of talk and beer afterwards. So yeah, so I think that's probably it. Thank you. All right.